Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic this week in WordPress and SaaS. Got a great guest. I haven't got my co-host. He is ill. He's getting tested today for the dreaded COVID. I wish Stephen well. I hope he hasn't got the dreaded virus that has dominated our psyche for the past 2 years, folks. I've got a great guest. She's part of the WP-Tonic Roundtable panel. She's based in Europe. She's MrsDivi. It's Tanya Quintieri. I've just destroyed her second name. I'm going to let her do a quick intro. We're going to be discussing all things transcription, about WordPress internationalizing, more about what the great leaders said in the State of the Word on Tuesday, which was also about a lot of it, about internationalization and translation. So, Tanya, would you like to give a quick 20-30 second intro to the tribe?
Sure. My name is Tanya Quintieri. That's an acquired Italian last name. I'm American, based in just outside of Prague in the Czech Republic. I'm 45 years old. I've been doing WordPress since about 2011, 2012. And I'm a translator. I've been doing that since 2002. And for myself, I brought together those two worlds under the brand MrsDivi. And I specialize in WPML. I've been using that since the beginning. I have dabbed into other solutions, but honestly, nothing has really convinced me as much as WPML did. And
Wow, that's
happy
great.
to talk about globalization today.
Yeah, it's all kind of linked, isn't it? I think it makes some sense. So it's going to be a great conversation. We're going to go for an advert from my major sponsor, Castos. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. Support Castos. And by doing that, go to the WP-Tonic recommendations page. So it's WP-Tonic/recommendations. There's some great offers there. Also a list of all the products and services that WP-Tonic recommends to the WordPress community. It's all stuff that I've used or my team have used, and I have confidence that you'll find it great stuff. Plus, there's some great special offers on that page. Just go over there, be blown away. So, Tanya, let's start in a little bit more detail. First of all, how did you get into WordPress? And then was your translational powers there before you got into WordPress, or did you get into the translational area after WordPress?
So translation came first, and that was totally by chance. At the time, I lived in Germany, and I had 2 small children, and I decided to go back to school. And so I was missing income, obviously, going back to school. And so I waited tables in the evenings. And one evening after my shift, I was looking through a local newspaper, and the software company was looking for a translator. And I was thinking, you know what? I'm American. I know German. I can do this. Can't be that hard. And I sent them a test translation, and they were all happy. And I ended up working for them over 14 years. But throughout that time, I learned how much I had no clue about translation and all the processes involved, and the auxiliary tasks that come with it. And so I learned a lot about translation. I even founded an association for translators back in 2011. And so I'm what you would call what is the English word for it? Oops, sorry, my monitor is going off. So I came in like sideways into the profession. I had the expertise in marketing, but didn't know anything about translation. And I started out with marketing translations. And as opposed to having a formal education as a translator, going to university, getting your diploma, etc. And more people are actually translating like that, especially when they work for clients directly and not through translation agencies, because most of the translations done worldwide still go through agencies. I estimate probably about 75 to 85% of the entire volume. And most of those translators who do work for clients directly, be that small startups or huge global, national, international firms, I would say a lot of them are people who came into the profession from a different angle.
Right. So you were saying, and I just want to point out that Tanya's been a real champion. She's not feeling 100% herself, but she still agreed to do the interview, and it's much appreciated, Tanya. Hopefully we can push through this. I was interested in your reply. You were saying that it's still dominated by translation agencies. Can you give a little bit of insight about what they do, what maybe a freelancer that's got a project and the client is asking, how do I want to offer this in various languages, this e-commerce website or this membership website, and they're looking at plugins, but they're also looking to hire a translator directly or through agency. Where do these agencies fit, and what are some of the things that you feel the audience has to know about them?
Okay, so typically, and obviously there's always exceptions to the rules, but typically this is what happens. When a company has, well, first of all, many companies don't even know how to go about finding a translator or somebody that will translate their stuff, right? So they go online, and obviously, agencies have a higher marketing budget, etc. So when you type, I don't know, English translation into Chinese, the first couple of pages on Google are going to be all about, agencies. And so that's how clients usually end up with, working with agencies. The other thing is that most freelance translators are reluctant to outsource or to team up with other translators. So they usually can only offer their own language combination and usually their own area of specialization, right? Whereas freelancers like myself, I outsource to translators who either work in other industries or have different specializations. Like I would never translate medical reports or patents or legal stuff. I just don't do that because I don't know enough about it, right? And but I also have people working for me, via outsourcing who translate into other languages, because that's the next thing. Oftentimes companies, and today more so than 10, 15 years ago, people will not just start, okay, I'm going to have my website in French and Spanish. No, they want to have it in Italian and Swedish and, God knows how many languages. And it's hard for translators or freelancers to put those kind of teams together. So it's easier for those clients to go to an agency where usually you don't have translators working directly with the agency. They're just hired on a project basis as freelancers. And what the agency does is they basically manage the project. They manage the databases that you need to have consistent translations. They manage deadlines, payments, things like that. So they basically do the translation management and the recruiting, I guess. I'm going to have to close my window.
Right. So when you do that search as a freelancer, as a WordPress freelancer, or your small agency in the WordPress, and you've got this client and they want consultation. So you do a search yourself. Up comes all these agencies, and you seem to indicate that they provide technology in the background, or they should do, and management insight to manage a group of freelance individuals that either they're paying direct or they're paying per project or on a kind of retainer, all the ways that freelancers or self-employed people are hired. But what are some of the how does a freelancer or a small WordPress agency make it? What are there any insights about any red flags around A, this is just too cheap, B, how can you give any kind of tips or insights how they can quickly make some judgment calls about probably the 2 to 3 translational agencies that they're approaching?
Okay. So one huge red flag is when you run into agencies that say they offer all languages, all specialized areas. You know, maybe they do, but in that case, you're probably just a number, you know, and they assign their what do they call it? Their resources. Translators hate being called resources. So you might end up having 5 different translators working on maybe 5,000 words of text just to get a quick turnaround. You know, they don't talk to each other. The translation can be inconsistent, especially when you have a project manager assigned to your project who doesn't even speak the target languages, you know, so they can't really have that final look at it. Therefore, if at all possible, I would always either go for a freelancer who is well connected or for a small specialized agency.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to find those kind of contacts is really, you know, ask your business networks, ask for recommendations. If all goes wrong, you can try to contact your local translation association. Translators are in associations, and usually if you Google, I don't know, in the US, it's ATA. In Germany, it's the BDU or DVUD. And, you know, France has theirs, and Italy, and basically every country. And usually those translators are vetted so that you know that they know what they're doing. And then, of course, when you speak to your contact, when you're actually, you know, explaining your project to them, the problems you're having, whatever, listen if they ask the right questions, right?
Yeah.
It should be relevant to what you're doing. Somebody who specializes in horse training, for lack of a better example, might not know anything about how clients of a software company would want to be addressed, right? Or wouldn't use the right terms or not find the right tone of voice. They wouldn't be able to point out cultural differences for that specific target market or the target client or customer. So listening for the right questions often helps a lot.
Yes. Are there any kind of forums, online resources? Because I think any educated client or freelancer or small agencies that looking for external services, when I've ever been in that situation, Tanya, I've always gone online and done some pre-research to find out what are some of the key questions I should be asking and what are the right answers generally, so I can get some red flags when I'm actually approaching some possible resources. So are there some online resources that people can go to find out about what are some of the questions or some insights into the general industry in general?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And again, I would have to refer to the associations. I know there's one pamphlet that was written by a quite famous translator in the translation industry, obviously. And that brochure was translated into so many languages and is provided by so many associations. I believe the name is How to Buy Translations or something like that. But I can look it up and share a link later. But that's basically a brochure that tells people how to buy translations, you know, what to look for, what to expect. But then, you know, there's a few translators who do a really good job with blogging and educating the client site. So if you go online and you know, just type, how do I find the best translator for my project? I'm sure there's going to be tons of stuff that pops up that is really valuable.
All right, that's fair enough. We're going to go for a break. When we come back, I'm going to be asking Tanya about the role of artificial intelligence AI, how's that, and how the whole world of translational plugins in the WordPress ecosystem, some insights, some recommendations around that. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. Before we go into other questions with Tanya, I just want to say, if you want to join the conversation and be part of the tribe, please go to the WP-Tonic Facebook group, mastermind group. If you post any questions for Tanya, I will post them in the supporting show notes and also in the weekly WP newsletter. So if you want to be part of the conversation, go there and post your questions there for Tanya. That would be great, and it'd be great if you were part of the active conversation in that group. In that group. So, you know, the buzzwords, you know, most people in the WordPress listen to this podcast are either real power users or they're actively making their living in WordPress as designers, implementers, agency owners, but they're making their money from WordPress in some way. So their introduction, probably, which was my own when I got involved in a couple of projects that needed a couple different languages, was through plugins, through the plugin and the plugin services. Can you give a quick outline of maybe 2 or 3 of the leading plugins, and what are some of their strengths and weaknesses based on your professional experience and insight, Tanya?
Okay. Yeah, well, like I said, I love working with WPML just because it gives me as a designer, web developer, whatever you want to call me, a very granular form of control of the content that you put out there. And there's so many little satellite plugins around it where you can just really, you know, take the most or get the most out of your translated website. One example would be they have a glue plugin for Yoast, the SEO solution. Not necessarily my favorite one, but in that case, you know, when you can put those 2 together like that, that is really, really neat. Also, it works awesome with WooCommerce, any WooCommerce plugin, really. And there's a learning curve, right? I don't believe that for beginners or people who don't do it regularly, that WPML is too easy to use just because it's so powerful, right? Yeah. Sometimes I wish, because I do have some products for freelancers, you know, where I kind of give them the basic setup of WordPress and I give them a basic design, and then they can go ahead and fill their content and stuff. So it's kind of like a guided do-it-yourself thing. And sometimes I wish that for WPML, there was like a light version for people who don't understand, you know, PHP and all that stuff. So it's not the easiest thing to use, but if you've used it a couple of times and you know, you're interested in the technology behind it, then it's really, really good and powerful. I know it's not cheap, but good things never are cheap. That's at least my experience. There's a few free plugins out there.
What do you know, you've made it clear that you think that's the leader of the pack, but are there 2 others that, you know, you don't feel offer the power and looking for the right word, Tanya, maybe the quality of scope, but are there a couple that are less complicated that might not offer, you know, but are still not useless? Those, you know, right. Are there a couple others that you would push our audience maybe to look at?
You know, for simple brochure sites, you can definitely go with things like Polylang. That's really pretty easy. Of course, it can also go the handmade route of translating your PO files and MO files and stuff like that. But then again, you need the knowledge to do that. So if it was a really simple brochure site, that doesn't have any membership functionality or e-commerce or events or anything like that, then something free like Polylang is totally fine. I've heard they have a pretty decent support forum, where users help each other. And then, of course, there's a totally automated route that you can take, and that is using something like the Google Translate plugin. It's just a plugin where it automatically translates the content into any language you want, like on the fly. But the translations are kind of shitty. Just because Google doesn't use the best machines to translate. But I have used that, for instance, for a site that had to go up super fast. It was an information site for refugees that were coming to Germany, and they needed to provide a site where they could, check information on where they could get clothes, how they could get medical attention, etc., things like that. So basic information. And so we installed the Google Translate plugin because there was just no time to get, translations in all kinds of African languages. So that's an instance where I'm like, okay, I can do that. I can support that. But in all other cases, the more high-end your product is, the more expensive your product is, the more I don't want to call it prestige, but sometimes when I see brands that are so fancy, and they have this huge marketing department and stuff, and then they go into a different market, and they don't give a damn about the translation, and I'm like, then leave it. Don't do it in the first place if you're not.
So I totally agree with you. So I know this is going to be a difficult question, but like I said during this interview, Tanya, the couple of times that I've been involved in multi-language website has been around e-commerce. Mm-hmm. One was a manufacturer and sold direct. It was fireplaces and that, but it was a kind of I won't go into detail because they might be still in business, but mm-hmm. Basically, they wanted English, Portuguese, and I think it was German. And it was like a one key product with about 12 to 20 SKUs, variations on the main product. So I would classify that as small to medium. And they had a reasonable budget for development through WooCommerce. I don't know if you've been involved in many e-commerce transaction solution setups, but the parameters I've just given you to hire somebody like you and to hire somebody that could translate, let's say, German and Portuguese or Portuguese, what kind of very broad figure do you think people should be really thinking that somebody that knows what they're doing is going to quote them? I know this is a difficult question, but it's a pretty obvious question also that I would ask you, isn't it?
Well, you know what? I don't really think it's all that difficult. Difficult is to determine the parameters, right?
Yes.
So if, let's say if a plant shop were to come to me, right? Because aside from the fact that I do marketing and IT translations, one of my big passions is indoor plants. And I'd love to do a plant shop page. But since none of my clients are plant shop owners yet, I guess this is a good example. But I'm very knowledgeable about indoor plants, right? So if I were to translate that into English, first of all, I would know how to find a Portuguese translator. I wouldn't do that myself, but I would know how to. And I'd team up with them, whatever. And assuming that I'm installing WPML, assuming that I am localizing the imagery, graphic design, etc., because that has to be localized as well. Assuming that I'm doing the research for legal grounds, because, if you have, I don't know, a US site and you start offering your stuff in German, you become responsible to make your site legally safe for the German market, right? You'll have to start to add a legal notice. There is obviously GDPR stuff that you need to take into account, etc. And a verse translator who knows about e-commerce, global e-commerce, will know about these things and can point it out to you. I mean, they can't obviously give you a legal counsel or anything like that, but they can point it out. You know, like, hey, Jonathan, you're missing this and this and this, and maybe we should get a lawyer to look into this just to make it safe. Right. So if I were to do all of that, from setting up the tech side, doing the consulting part, outsourcing the other language that I don't speak, on my end, you're looking at an hourly rate of 129 euros, which sounds like a lot, but since I know what I'm doing, I can do more in that hour than other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you break that down to a word, like say you have a website, you know, with the privacy policy to be translated, because that's always a big chunk. Maybe 5 to 10 products, about pages, stuff like that. You're probably looking at a word count of anywhere between 5,000 and 8,000 words. If you wanted to calculate that down to a word price, then you'd probably be somewhere between 12, 15, 18 cents per word, depending on, you know, the terminology, et cetera, how much research has to be done. But that's about the ballpark that you're looking at.
Right. So what would be a kind of the finished off amount, you know, the quoted amount? Are we looking at $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $10,000?
Depends on how big your website is and how repetitive your text is. Simple brochure website, maybe with 5 products. If I'd had to ballpark it per language, probably around 2,500, 3,000.
Right. So what I'm attempting is if you're listening to this, folks, and you think you're going to hire somebody that really knows what they're going to be doing, and it's for a higher price product, and don't think you're going to get all this done for $500. It ain't going to happen.
Well, you can. You're just going to get shitty results.
But it won't be great, you know. Yeah, I think we've made that quite clear. Right, I think we're coming to the end of the podcast. So are you feeling okay to continue for extra 10 minutes, or do you?
Sure.
Right, that's great. So in the bonus content, folks, which you'll be able to watch on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel and also the WP-Tonic Facebook Mastermind group page, I'm going to be discussing with Tanya about how artificial intelligence, how this is affecting, how it is going to be affecting this whole area a lot more in the next 2 years. So we're going to be delving in that, and our own reaction to what Matt Marek had to say about translation in his State of the Word on Tuesday. So Tanya, how can people find out more about you and your words of wisdom around translation and everything we've just discussed?
Well, for one, you can find me on my website, MrsDivi.com, MrsDivi.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Instagram, or you can just drop an email, wordpress@MrsDivi.com, and I'll be happy to schedule a call with whoever is interested in more information.
That's great. If you really also want to point out to your tribe, if you've got a WordPress product service and you also want to support the show, we do offer sponsorship packages for the smaller possible sponsor, from 1 episode to 6 months. You find all that packaging sponsorship information on WP-Tonic/sponsorship. And it's a great way of getting your message out to a very focused and passionate WordPress group of people. Also, I want to point out, this is going to, if you're listening to this, this is going to be our last show of 2022. We will be back in the first week of January. Me and my great co-host Stephen want to wish you a great and healthy Christmas and New Year, and thank you so much in listening to the show. It's much appreciated. And like I say, if you really want to get more involved in the discussion, and I really want you to do that, join us on the WP-Tonic Facebook Mastermind group page and join the conversation there. We'll see you soon, and please join us for the bonus conversation. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So into bonus content. So obviously, one of our panelists on the Friday show, Andrew, he's got his Bertha. Artificial intelligence has become increasingly a buzzword, but there seems to be some real meat to the buzzword to some extent. The technology seems to have gone over to a tipping point that, products like Bertha can write and Jarvis can write pretty good content. I would imagine this is going to some extent, in the next 2 to 5 years, I'm not an expert, but I'm imagining this is going to be revolutionary and revolutionize the translation industry. What's your own thoughts there?
It's already doing that, especially like with larger languages. There's this product. Well, no, let me go back. Obviously, it all started with Google Translate, right? And behind Google Translate, there was a product called Google Translation Kit, which took it a step further. That was where users would correct the output from Google, and that is how Google learned. That's how they trained their algorithm. I think they discontinued it in 2018 or 2019 or something like that, because the AI technology has gotten so advanced that technology that Google had used is, it's no longer state of the art. One of my favorite translation machines in the AI sphere to date is DeepL.com. Don't nail me down on the terminology, but I think it's neural linguistic artificial intelligence, something like that they use. But there's neural in there. And especially for the big languages, it has a really good output. But again, it takes a translator to know a translator. I don't recommend people who don't know how to localize content, that they just take that for gospel, what that machine puts out. Yes, it's grammatically correct in 99% of the cases. But again, there's so many things that go into localization that needs a trained eye. For instance, my partner, you see his desk behind me, he's also a translator. He works for the Dubai tourism, whatever, some official office, I don't know. But when he does their marketing, and he translates into Czech, and Czechs are super, they sexualize everything. I mean, from car shops to whatever, they always have these girls on their ads that are hardly wearing anything. And it's culturally accepted. Of course, something like that would never fly in Dubai, right? And that is something that AI cannot tell you today. Maybe it can read images one day and say, this is not appropriate for a Muslim country or Muslim market. And then the other thing is, when we're talking about Muslim markets, for instance, we have the right to left alphabets. Or if you're looking at Asian markets where they write from top to bottom, or with kanjis, things like that, how is a web designer who doesn't know the language, who doesn't know how marketing in that country works, how are they going to ensure that the final product is really good enough to achieve the goals that the client has? So
yeah, I think they're great points, but I also feel that there's some people that I come across saying, "Oh, it's the translation to be a translator, and the translator industry is kind of semi-doomed because of AI." You know, in the next 10 or 20 years, you know, maybe we get a Star Trek global language translator, who knows? But for the foreseeable future, I actually think this technology will expand the market.
It will.
Because we've got to be realistic here. You know, in the podcast part of the show, we were kind of hinting that if you wanted a solution that was high quality, that was worth the investment of money and time, that you were looking between 3 to 5, maybe a larger site from 10. We got to be realistic here. That seemed very reasonable figures that we were hinting on, but also to a lot of people, that's totally out of their price point as well. To some people,
But then they're not ready to expand. To be honest, if money like that, when you're aiming for a new market, you're launching on a new market, right? I mean, there's going to be social media stuff that you have to do. There's going to be support requests, etc. You're going to be working with your translator in the ideal scenario for a long time.
Yeah, I think I think I didn't really frame that question that well, because I wasn't really talking about the established business, somebody that, and what I mean by established business, that's, you know, between $500,000 to over $1 million. That's I'm talking about somebody that might have a very small niche product that's just looking to make like 30, 40,000 a year. And they couldn't really translate everything up to standard there might be a foreign market where they could ship their product or something, but they just couldn't take it on because I was really describing that, really.
There's always ways to work around that. When I was still in Germany, I had a second office in Berlin, and just for the nature of Berlin, I mean, that's, you know, Germany's startup market. I was in touch with a lot of startup founders, and there was, off the top of my head, at least 2 or 3 where I had a model where they did a small down payment, and then, you know, the rest of my invoice was sort of my invest in the company that I got back after a year or 2 with interest. You know, that's something that works. I mean, obviously, those were products that I was convinced of, where I knew they were going to sell, right? But I mean, what better business partner?
You hope.
Well, yeah, but I was right, you know, because I think I have a pretty good business nose. But you know, there's always ways to work around that. Or there was this startup in Munich that recycled binders, lights binders. You probably don't know the brand, but they're quite iconic from the way that they're made, and they turned them into handbags that you take to the office, you know, where you can put your papers in and stuff. And I love that because, you know, it was sustainably sourced leather, if you can do that. It was a great recycling project.
Yeah,
they couldn't afford the initial blurbs. So I said, okay, then I'll take one of your bags. And the bag was more expensive if I bought it than those 200 words that I translated for them, you know, that they needed to get going.
Yeah, I also feel because you're based in Europe and you're, you know, unlike, well, I'm not going to go there about the English decision, the UK's decision, but you're in the common market, which has, I don't know how many different languages. Literally every state member has its own language, but you're in a free trade area. So being able to market to those areas and have good
translations
on their website is rather important. Where obviously I'm originally from the UK, but I live in the US, and we've got to be bilingualism in the US is very poor, apart from the Hispanic community. That the country is only bordered by 2 other countries, and one of those countries is English French speaking, which, because of his historical factors, is much more bilingual. But we must face facts that America's a continent, and also with only 2 countries that border it. So the necessity, which is going to increase anyway, because the real growth is going to be in the Far East and in other countries than America. That's going to change, but I just think the psyche in the US is a bit different to the psyche in reality of where you're
Definitely.
based in the common market. Do you think I'm on the right track, or am I not?
Yeah, definitely. But to be honest, most of my colleagues who translate, or most of my colleagues who are based in America, obviously they translate into English because that's their mother tongue. They still do have a lot of work. It's just the other way around, you know. They have like French companies, Spanish-speaking companies, Portuguese-speaking companies, whatever, you know, who are expanding into the US market. So maybe in terms of the Americas, don't think right now, obviously in the future that's going to change, but right now I think it's more about translating into English rather than out of English into whatever other language.
So, you know, when you're talking about, I'm not an expert on language. I know Welsh and the Basque language as 2 examples of very difficult languages, with some of the oldest languages in recorded history, especially in Europe. Other like French, Italian are classified as Latin-based. But how does a translator or deal with a Far Eastern language like Chinese Mandarin or Japanese? Because I don't know if I'm talking out of semi-educational ignorance here, but they're kind of visual. You're talking about a total different cup of tea then, aren't you? Or got any insights about that?
I do have a couple of clients where I'm dealing with languages that I have no idea about. And I do have to say, I'm more comfortable to outsource to Asian translators that are based in Europe, just because, you know, if need be, I can sit together with them and meet up and you know, meet the client, whatever, rather than having to rely on somebody that I only know online. But there is one gentleman in, I think he's actually based in Hong Kong, who runs a small boutique agency, very, very specialized on IT. And I've been working with him for, I don't know, 8-9 years at least. And he came to me by recommendation from a translator colleague of mine who translates from Chinese into German. And, you know, they often work together, and that's how I got the contact. So again, I think it's personal contacts that can help, even if it's not a first contact, but, you know, maybe somebody, you know, knows somebody.
If there come any insights by working with that gentleman and working on actual real projects that you didn't realize about moving a kind of European-based language to a Far Eastern one, though?
To be honest, I would always outsource that development part for languages that don't go left to right, because I just can't assess it, right? I don't even know what a website.
I do understand, because you're dealing with a total ball game, aren't you? You're talking about a picturized. What is the technical term they're using? Pictures
Kanji?
with, pardon?
Kanjis?
I don't know what the technical, because it's a kind of symbolic language, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's got they have multiple concepts. I might be talking that. Am I correct in saying they're literally in one kind of, I don't know how to describe it, a cipher kind of image? You can have multiple concepts in one.
Depending on how they're combined, etc. Yeah, it's really complicated. And as a translator, you know, I know enough to know that I don't know enough to manage that part. And that's where I outsource. And obviously I outsource to people who have the competence that I lack and whom I trust. And I realize that that is especially like for business owners who I see that a lot with my clients. Like when I'm dealing directly with the business owner, you know, the person who has their heart and soul in the business, and they have to trust me to put their words into words that they don't understand, right? They have no way of checking what I'm doing for them. And I find that incredibly hard. I would not want to be a translation client, to be honest.
Yeah, because
So,
I think you're going to be a very busy lady in the next 10, 20 years. Because fundamentally, because of the technology, and this will only grow because of the technology tools that will be available, then the ability and need to offer is just going to just rocket. So, and people will learn the hard way.
yeah.
My experience is people, especially based maybe on some, I don't know, unrealistic knowledge or what they've
It's
listened to
often
the
just
wrong.
ignorance, but not
Yeah,
in the negative sense, just in the sense of not being
yeah.
educated about it, right?
Well,
I mean,
you need a certain level of knowledge to know that you
right,
don't know,
right.
basically, don't you? That you need a little bit of knowledge to know, well, I don't actually know what the hell I'm talking about in this particular area. You need to know enough to know that you need to hire somebody. But a lot of people aren't at that stage, and they have to learn the hard way, don't they?
Yeah.
Through losing a possible lucrative order because the piece doesn't make any sense and it's full of grammar mistakes. So as
Or
somebody
even
that,
getting a lawsuit, you know, like I said, to me, that's something that really boggles my mind. People don't realize that they have to comply with the markets that they're entering, like with the
yeah,
legal frameworks, right? So
that could be very expensive, couldn't it?
it
But
can.
there we go. I think it's been a great conversation. Thank you for Tanya. I know you're not 100%. And Tanya came in at the last minute because we had another guest. I was going to offer to interview Tanya in the beginning of next year anyway. But we had another guest, but unfortunately she went down, well, one of her children went down with COVID.
Y'all stay
So
healthy.
for understandable reasons, she had to cancel, but she will be joining us in the new year. But Tanya filled her shoes at the kind of quasar at the last minute. And I think it's been a fantastic conversation, Tanya. I think we've
Thank
given
you.
some insights about this whole world. And thank you. And like I say, Tanya has become a regular member of my round panel when she's 100%, that is.
I'll be back next
And
week.
please join us on the Roundtable Show, where we always have a tongue-in-cheek and not prerogative. I'm not pronouncing very well in this episode, but a tongue-in-cheek insight in of the world of WordPress and tech in general. But we're going to stop the show now. We'll see you in the new year, folks. Bye.
Bye. Happy New Year.